fast am I? Hello and welcome to this edition of Agenda. I'm Ewan Gorn. Those campaigning for a specialist ME service are growing frustrated with a lack of government progress on the issue. It was due to be set up by 2020. Meanwhile, similarities between ME and long COVID have been identified, leading some to hope new support will be able to help those with both post-viral conditions. We speak to two people with long COVID searching for answers on how to manage their condition, and a man who's had ME for 10 years and is pushing for government help. There's been more than 350 cases of COVID-19 on the island, with that figure edging closer to 400 as the months pass by. From that, some of those infected have gone on to experience symptoms for months, with what's being called long COVID. Health experts have drawn similarities with this post-viral illness and ME. Both share symptoms including fatigue, muscle pain and exhaustion. Medics remain split on how to diagnose, treat and support the conditions. Some with long COVID have now turned to the guidance for ME to help them understand more about their condition. I spoke to Dave Wilson, a local accountant and self-confessed fitness nut who's also just become a windsurfing coach before he got COVID-19. He's now got long COVID and is searching for answers about his condition. We started at the start with our conversation. He told me first when he contracted the virus.
March the 18th. I'd been in work all day, went home that night, and I was watching telly. The old temperature started building up, and this achy bones. I thought, this feels a bit flu-y. And I remember specifically not giving my children a hug that night and saying, just keep your distance. And the following morning I was in bed all day and didn't feel great at all.
And how severe were your symptoms?
The biggest severity was probably the night sweats and the thirst that was required in the middle of the night. I was actually drinking a whole pint of water in the middle of the night and probably sweating that all out as well, judging by the pyjamas in the morning.
So would you say you had it bad?
It was the worst thing that I've had. It was worse than a standard flu, definitely way worse than a cold.
When we talk about how you felt in the weeks or so afterwards, how did you feel? Was there a point where you sort of felt, right, I'm over the sort of acute symptoms, how am I feeling now?
Yeah, the general weakness and sweats and flu-y symptoms lasted probably over a week, maybe 2 weeks, and a consistent cough came in as well. But then after a couple of weeks started feeling a little bit better. We were still in lockdown at that point. And when they started releasing us to be able to get out for our hour exercise, I thought, right, we'll slowly build this back up like I would normally for trying to train for an event, and just did some gradual cycling around the Manx roads, which were lovely and quiet, and going out for little walks on the railway line, and then gradually built that up to also doing the Couch to 5K app on the running. But I didn't actually get to complete that in the end because I didn't feel like going the full distance.
So what did building your exercise level back up, how did that make you feel?
To begin with, good. But then it got to a point where I actually felt like I was going backwards on my energy levels following the exercise. Yeah, it was strange because normally you would expect a slow ramp up. You'd be feeling really good then for days after and ready to go on to the next stage. But it was almost like a reversal of that expectation.
So were you thinking, right, I'm over this now, I'm going to feel a bit muggy maybe for a bit, but I'm going to work myself back up to my active life before? And was that the thinking really?
Yeah, I was keen to build muscle mass back up because after a couple of weeks of hanging around doing nothing, it doesn't take long for your muscles to waste away. So I was very keen to build that back up and get back to the point where I was beforehand.
And so when did you realise, hang on, I'm not getting any better with the exercise, I'm still quite ill here?
Well, actually, I think the awareness of being quite ill is only recently. I've been trying to storm on through it and carry on doing all my exercise, getting out as much as possible, but definitely noticed that my endurance ability was nowhere near what it was before, and I'd only be able to do an activity for maybe half the amount of time of previously if I was lucky, and then it'd be the effects a day or two after that was really showing on energy levels.
So how is it affecting you then? Comparing the amount of exercise you're doing now to what you used to. I mean, what are the after effects now?
Okay, I seem to have a constant lactic acid build-up feeling in the thighs. It's as if you've just done an endurance event and that affect the following day, but I've got that feeling every day. The lungs feel as if there's a constant slight burn down the bronchial tube and to the lower side of the lung. It's not like an asthma attack. I do suffer from asthma and I use exercise as a means of keeping the asthma under control. The asthma I feel has been controlled very well during the whole period. So I know it's not like normal asthma, but there's a definite little burn in the lungs there, which is probably affecting the lung function. That's probably yet to be tested. Whether we've got the equipment on the island to be able to test that, I'm not sure. And I'd imagine there's probably quite a few other people out there who might also benefit in having that sort of test to find out, are they in this long COVID box, and should they be backing off their exercise as well and just take it easy, listen to the body, and if the body is saying don't feel up to it today, just ease off, have a rest day, look after yourself.
So were you actually ever diagnosed with long COVID?
Long COVID itself it's like a pigeonhole terminology that we're currently using to say, you're not right, you're not where you were. I wasn't diagnosed originally back in March with having COVID, but I managed to get the antibody test in June, which did show that, yes, I had the COVID antibodies, which then allowed them to put me into this long COVID box when I was still feeling lethargic, fatigued, thought it might be other ailments potentially, which were all tested, such as B12, and they're all coming back good. So because everything else is being eliminated, it's, your fatigue is probably long COVID.
What actual specific advice did you get? Did they have any recommendations for, like, exercise, diet, medication?
On the exercise, it's take it easy. If you're going out anywhere doing exercise, make sure you're with someone and pace yourself. I think that was the key word of pace. Not build up your energy levels or your fitness, but just pace it. As for food, eat well and also hydrate. Make sure you're getting plenty of water was one of the key bits of information about a month ago.
So where are you up to now then, Dave, with all this? You've done your own research, I suppose, and there's a lot of uncertainty about what exactly is the appropriate treatment and guidelines, but you've done a bit of your own reading. So where are you up to with managing how you're feeling?
Yeah, I read a really interesting article 2 weeks ago, Ewan, following some conversations with colleagues who have either had ME experiences themselves or family members. And it's not just one person who I've had this conversation with, it's quite a few, which triggered me to read some ME Association research. And there's a lovely paper that they did back in September on COVID and post-viral fatigue syndrome. And they're looking at a lot of similarities between the way that people with ME feel, especially after exercise, and the way that people with COVID are also feeling after exercise. And there's quite a high focus on heart rate and trying to keep the heart rate down to about 55 to 60% of your maximum heart rate. And there's many calculations out there of how you do it. The old classic is 220. Take off your age and you come to approximately your maximum heart rate. There are other more scientific ways of calculating that. I haven't actually experienced that method myself yet. I do wear a heart rate monitor, sports heart rate monitor, the MyZone one, when I'm doing my activities, which gives a lovely little pictorial graph afterwards to see what colour zones you've been in. And I think that's helping with building up an understanding of, after a day of exercise, how do I feel the following day and the day after? And I'm able to look back to see if the reason for my fatigue a couple of days down the line might still be due to that exercise. There's a test that one of the papers is talking about of the VO2 max that I haven't had yet. I'd love to have it to see how it goes, but it's basically where you sit on a cycle machine, turbo trainer, they plug you up to oxygen masks, and they do various readings. And the key is not necessarily the reading on the day of doing the exercise, but it's the day after and the day after that, which is where a lot of ME research is being focused.
How challenging has it been emotionally for you to come to terms with the energy you've got now compared to what you used to have? Because you're a windsurfer, you take part in all kinds of activities. How difficult has that been now to sort of reckon with the new level of energy you've got?
It's frustrating, but at the same time, another word that's coming out a lot from people I've been speaking to who've been down the ME route is you've got to accept the level that you're at. Now, from someone who's been into sport all their lives, trying to accept this current level of fitness, it's hard, and I'm determined to get better and build up my fitness to where I was before. But maybe I do have to accept that I won't hit that higher level and just go for a level where I can live an enjoyable life, still get out doing sport, get out windsurfing still, play badminton still. Currently not getting on the bike as much as I'd like to, but get that back into my weekly planner of getting out and enjoying the Isle of Man and everything it's got to offer.
If somebody thinks they've got long COVID, what would be your advice to them if they're sort of in the aftermath period? How would you suggest that they go about managing how they're feeling?
Yeah, take care of yourself. Maybe start keeping a diary of your activities, how much sleep you're getting, what food you're consuming, what drink you're consuming, including water in that as well. Are you getting enough? Of course, alcohol. Do you need to just rein it back a little bit? Tricky at this time of year, but some of the good food and good body maintenance plans that I'm reading are saying that, yeah, you can have a little bit every now and again, but everything in moderation and focus on good quality food, good quality sleep. Still do some exercise. I think it's important to keep that muscle exercise regime up, but not too much. Just rein it back if you're used to doing real big pounding stuff in the gym or out in the hills. But take care of yourself.
That was Dave Wilson. You're listening to Agenda on Manx Radio. Those campaigning for a specialist service for people with ME say it could also help those with long COVID access the right support. Government has yet to establish a dedicated service for those with ME, despite promises to do so by 2020. We have contacted the Health Department for comment. I spoke to campaigner Craig Morris, who's had the illness for 10 years now and has been one of the key players in a push to get better support from health services.
Thousands of people who've had COVID are now being diagnosed with ME. So I think the main thing is that some people aren't bouncing back from their post-viral fatigue. It's that sort of fatigue, lack of energy that's characteristic of long COVID and ME. It's activity-induced fatigue, it's brain fog, it's poor sleep, it's orthostatic intolerance, sort of getting dizzy and so on when you stand up, and just activity making your symptoms worse, really.
That advice, when it's been given to ME sufferers, is the last thing you want, is that right?
Yes, I mean that the advice, as Professor Paul Garner in Liverpool said, is don't try and dominate this virus, accommodate it. So learn to rest and pace and to ask for help, to delegate, to explain why you need it. But unfortunately, some people are still being mistakenly advised to walk more to cure themselves, both for long COVID and for ME, and that's absolutely the last thing that people should be doing.
So can we say then that long COVID and ME are, in terms of treatment, one and the same, in terms of the advice that needs to be given and the support that needs to be given?
There are definitely some striking similarities. Dr. Anthony Fauci in America, he's one of the main government advisors from the National Institutes of Health, said that some people with post-COVID will go on to develop ME. And so there are a lot of similarities. Some people with long COVID do also have some of the heart and lung problems associated with the acute stage of the illness. But a lot of people who are then 3 months on struggling and not recovering are being diagnosed with ME. And actually, more of the people diagnosed with long COVID and ME are the ones who weren't hospitalised. They're the ones that had mild to moderate symptoms, but then haven't recovered months later.
And they may not even have had a test.
Yeah, they may have gone under the radar, absolutely.
You've campaigned, and the ME Association has campaigned for a service for people with ME through the health department. It's not really there yet. But now that we're seeing long COVID emerging, are you concerned about that lack of service and those lack of pathways and the effect it might have on those with long COVID, as it has been having on those with ME?
I think it makes the case for a service more and more urgent, not just because of the people who, 350 people with ME on the island who've already been diagnosed and don't have any help or support, but for those that are in the stage where they're suffering and they're frightened and they don't understand what's happening. And I think the business case that we made, the proposal we made to the Minister for a service is that a very small amount of help early on when people get sick can help them stop getting a lot sicker quickly. It's a bit like with a heart attack. There's a critical period where if you help people, they can actually live a full, healthy, normal life afterwards. But if you don't, then the prognosis isn't good. And I'm just hoping that we can get the help that people need to bounce back, because without help, you can get a lot worse really quickly and you don't necessarily recover.
And long COVID sufferers have told us that they're getting very different advice from different health professionals. Is it the consistency of the advice that's needed?
I think so. Doctors aren't really expected to be able to help with complex illnesses. They're supposed to point you to the people that can. And those specialist services are more widely available in the UK, where they know that doing nothing is no longer an option. There are a lot of things that can be done, that must be done to help people with long COVID, to help people with ME. We know what they are. We've spent months talking to some of the experts in the UK who run these services, some of whom are helping the government with their long COVID and COVID response. And it's been amazing to find out all the things that can be done, and that some of them can even be done online.
So tell us about what would be an effective, whether it be a body or service, what would be an effective way of dealing with both ME and long COVID by extension?
The plan we put to the government was that your GP or a GP with a special interest would refer you to an occupational therapist. And essentially that support is life-saving, it's transformational. When I became ill here, I was getting sicker and sicker. I was getting the wrong advice, and it was devastating for my health. And luckily, I was in a position where someone could help me get specialist advice from Liverpool. But most people aren't lucky enough to have someone who read law at Oxford to work for free to push the government to make them do that. What we need is services for local people who can just see an OT and can stop them getting worse. They can explain what to do, what not to do, why some of the things they thought they could do are making them sicker. And it's so scary when you're just getting worse and worse, but it's also so empowering when you can stabilize and get better. And I think just that OT can make the world of difference.
How difficult is it when you have ME, or I suppose now people with long COVID, they've been saying they just don't have the energy to champion their own cause a lot of the time? How frustrating is that?
It is incredibly frustrating. I was contacted by a mother of a daughter with ME recently who was frustrated at the lack of understanding from people in the medical profession, from teachers, from politicians, and just said people just don't understand how debilitating it is. There are hundreds of people who've shown amazing resilience on the island to just get to where they are, but they're still struggling to access education, basic medical services at the moment because of a lot of ignorance and misunderstanding. I think it makes me doubly angry when the misunderstandings are to do with young people, because I feel they're being let down by a system that should be supporting them, not making them get worse. And I think when you've got a position where people are being given completely the wrong advice and being told by some people that they don't even believe in their condition, and they're being told to do the opposite of what they've been told by, you'd be told to do it by a specialist unit in the UK. We just need to make that small investment. Well, the money's already been agreed by Tim, but we just need to use it to actually make sure that some practical help's available.
So you have been in contact with the government. What have they said?
We've had some really positive discussions, and I believe that the Minister does want to make the service happen. It's just that I fell ill 10 years ago and had a horrendous experience, and I'm still being contacted as recently as last week by people having the same experience I had, that there are problems getting a diagnosis, that some people are being misdiagnosed, that there isn't any practical help available. And when you know what can be done so easily and cheaply, when we've been in contact with all these wonderful services in the UK who are willing to help, even sometimes for free, to advise and get us up and running, I just think we're desperate for some practical help that in another 10 years' time, we're not still asking for the same basic support. There's such, it's just unfair, I think. There's really significant inequality here. It's not fair that people with private medical insurance can get help from the UK, but that most people just can't afford to, that they're just left to their own devices with no support whatsoever.
Well, do you think that now that long COVID is becoming a more acute problem, this might be something that will be coming forward sooner and kill two birds with one stone effectively?
I really hope so now that I think people seem much more sympathetic towards people with ME now, that I think more people are getting a virus and most are recovering, thank God, but not everybody. And I think the way that it's encouraged people to be a little bit more thoughtful and flexible, for example, the trauma that people experience going to Liverpool when they've deteriorated so badly they have to be sent to the hospital. Now we can work a little bit more flexibly and talk to the doctor on the phone, for example. I'm hoping that maybe we can access some of these specialist ME services in the short term, perhaps, through video conferencing and so on. I know that works well for a lot of the patients in the UK who can't travel to the services themselves.
Now, the ME Association is established as a charity. Would you encourage those with long COVID to get in touch, maybe play a part?
Absolutely. I think they're a brilliant source of advice and really high quality medical advice. Their medical advisor, Dr. Shepherd's been over here to help educate people and some of our medics and talk to patients. And I think, if we could just listen to his advice about convalescence and, not return to work too soon, to rest, relax and cautiously do what you can do. I think that's brilliant advice for people with long COVID and people with ME.
And would that be your advice then as somebody who didn't get the treatment they needed 10 years ago?
Absolutely. I was advised to walk more, and that badly damaged my health up to an hour and a half because I'd been so fit before, and that was devastating. So absolutely, you've got to stop, rest and pace. And the specialist service in Liverpool were horrified by the advice I'd been given and immediately said, don't do that, do the opposite. And that was transformational for me. And I just want people on the Isle of Man to be able to access that basic high quality information, because at the moment schools, employers, families are being given very different and confused advice from different GPs, and we need one specialist GP, one occupational therapist that people can talk to and say, look, I don't know what to advise my patient, can you tell them? And that would just be so transformational and a really positive development.
That was Craig Morris. Alice Quayle has long COVID and is a member of COVID Recovery Isle of Man. It's a Facebook group for those with the illness. By the way, it's running a survey to try and find out how many people have long COVID, so check it out at their Facebook page. That's COVID Recovery Isle of Man. I've been in touch with Alice about the latest advice for those with the illness. She gave me this update.
NICE and NHS England and the Royal College of General Practitioners all seem to be working on, they've got some preliminary guidance coming out in various forms on how to diagnose and help and treat and do rehab for people with long COVID. And so there's the start of some progress on how to actually look after people with this and stop them getting worse. So NHS England have got some stuff, and it's like, I think one of the key things is proper, like a thorough diagnosis of people with all different systems across the body, and not just go send somebody to a lung specialist and then a few months later send them to a heart specialist, and because that's not efficient. And they also give guidance on, how to do this, and I've not looked into it thoroughly, but how to set up these clinics. So it's like a one-stop shop. So somebody turns up, you say what your symptoms are, how severe they are, and then presumably get tests. And then you get, because they're so diverse, so many people have got so many different symptoms, but it all seems to be mostly driven by the same sort of things like inflammation and autoimmune responses. So there's lots of different things going on in different people. So you turn up and they can get an idea of what's going on, so then they can treat it. And what's really important is early intervention.
That was Alice Quayle. And that's all from this programme. We'll be back with more from Agenda soon, and you can listen again to this edition online via the Manx Radio website as a podcast or through Spotify. But for now, Guramayu and goodbye.